this video, I'm going to show you how to use a mouth atomizer. You could think of it as a poor man's airbrush. I like to think of it as a more useful tool than an airbrush because the cleanup is much more minimal and you don't have to plug it in, and there isn't the air generator noise that you have associated with an airbrush. So there's a lot of value to this. And it's something that before airbrushes were more prevalent, a lot of illustrators used. I started using it because one of my illustration heroes is Ralph Steadman. And you can see, this is just one of the books of his works that I have, but you can see in his works how he makes use of the mouth atomizer to spread color around. So I recommend that you look at some of his stuff. But that's when I got interested, was in the 80s, and it was easier to deal with than, for instance, getting out my whole airbrush setup. It's a pretty simple instrument. There's a mouthpiece at this end, which has a little cap on it, so that you don't have to suck on the metal straw or blow on the metal straw. And then there's a Y bar here, and this end here goes into your ink. And what happens is you blow here across this top tube, and this little divergence here, the velocity of your air causes low pressure down here to push what's in the ink bottle up here, and then your rest of your breath, which comes along here, which hasn't been diverted, the rest of your breath causes that to atomize into speckles of ink. And depending on how hard you blow, you can get darker, or you can also do light layers repeatedly and get darker saturation. And you can get quite good at this. I've seen people use a mouth atomizer and their work looks as stunningly even and beautiful as a mechanical airbrush. So you definitely can do that with practice. My demo today is going to be hampered a little bit because I'm recovering from a respiratory illness, but you'll get the idea of what one can do. You can use this with anything that is liquid. So you could use this with your inks, your paints. You can use it with your gouache paints, your watercolor paints. It doesn't have to be acrylic based. Just keep in mind that when those dots go down on your paper, if you wash over them, they're still going to be water soluble. So I'm going to be showing you with acrylic ink because it's the easiest. It's already diluted to a level that I want it to be diluted, and it's pretty much good to go. Now you may see a lot of practitioners who use the mouth atomizer just stick the piece right into the liquid like this and start blowing and moving around and doing stuff. I don't do that for the same reason I've been telling you already in other portions of the class, that I think you should decant your materials before using them. I think that in some ways there might be some condensation of spit that could happen in here that could travel down into your ink, and then you would have your main source of ink diluted with spit, and that seems to me like you're asking for bacteria to grow in your jar. But that's just me. You can go ahead and do that if you want. I prefer instead to decant my ink to little tiny bottles like this that you can get at any craft or art supply store. It has a little airtight seal, so I can keep the ink liquid during the length of my project that I'm using it. And it just seems easier for me to do this. There are bigger bottles or jars such as this. They tend to be too big. They take up too much ink in order to get a nice level at the bottom for the tool. But I find something like this is quite easy to use. Again, all of the things that we've looked at already in class or are about to look at, if we, depending on where this slots in the class, are usable with the mouth atomizer as far as masks go. You can use pre-existing professionally cut stencils. You can use your own stencils that you've cut. These are both commercial stencils. You can also use materials like this to give texture. Your gauze, you can use doilies, If you have decal scissors, you can cut decal edges on things and use them to create masks. You can use this mask tape that's very low tack and cut it to the way that you want it. And this comes in strips so that you can have strips and other kinds of linear designs. You can also use the masking tape that we've been using in class that I like to use, the Nichiban masking tape. And you can also use, and I'll show you in a minute, but you can also use Frisket. But first off, what I'm going to do is show you how you can actually use it with some of these materials just on the paper. So when we finish, we pull back, we see this texture has allowed us to do that. And if we pan over to here, that's allowed that. So again, you can use this with any of your stencils and any of the masks that you want to make with things like this. So what kinds of other fun things can we do with the mouth atomizer? We can use it to give background texture to our illustrations. So here we have a drawing that I did with marker and with brush pen. And let's say I want to do some shading or some extra color over here. Well, I can do a couple of things. I can cut a mask simply by cutting a piece of tracing paper or wax paper. I place this over my drawing, and I drew a little line where the edge was, the black edge, and then I cut it out, and so now I have this mask of that shape. You can cut it out of anything that will stay down and be flat while you're blowing on it. Okay, so this is a little problematic because the book bows up. I would need to weight something down here or hold this down in some way, perhaps put weights on the edges where I'm not going to use the mouth atomizer. I'm just going to use it in this area, let's say. So, or on a flat piece where this would lay flat. So this is not going to be suitable material for every situation, but in situations where you have something that is going to work flat, or if you're working at an angle, which is a great way to use the mouth atomizer, is to have your work at an angle and then just blow straight on it. Then you don't have to worry about tilting your ink bottle and perhaps spilling. So if you're working at an angle, you can tape up out of the area of the live area. You can tape up here and hold it in place. Okay? But this bows up a little bit too much for our purposes. Okay, you don't need to use expensive covering material for this part because there's no action that's going to happen there. And in fact, we only need the edge. So the edge comes down to here and it goes up to there. So I'm just going to tape this with my masking tape, and I'm going to tape this edge with my masking tape. Okay, so we've taped this in place, and then you're just going to take a little bit of the Frisket, and you're going to curve it back here, and you're going to make it join up with your piece of bond paper, so there's a seam there that the paint can't get through, and then you're going to smooth it down, which of course my page has popped up to meet me, and for purposes of the camera I'm not going to worry about that. But normally what would happen is this would be flat, and with a ruler you could just smooth this down into place and you wouldn't get these kinds of creases. But what we're going to do is, and I keep my point in when I'm not using it so I don't stab myself. We're going to take this now and we're going to cut through, and this takes some practice, so you don't want to do it for the first time on an illustration that you really love on paper that you're unaware of. But we're basically going to cut down, and you're going to feel with the knife through to where the paper is, so that you can lift this off. And I've cut a little bit into the black line because I want to have my paint start right at the edge of the black line, and anything that falls in the black line will look pretty much just like black. You can make your own choice about that. Sometimes I cut right to the edge, but you don't want to cut over the edge of your black line or the outline of your drawing, whatever edge you're looking at, because if you do that, then there will be a halo all around your piece. The halo will dispel the notion that this drawing was put on top of the background instead of the background being put on last. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to cut down through all of this. You could put your frisket on your drawing, trace through this. You'd have to probably use a light table, trace through it, cut it, and put it in place. But I found, and some people prefer to do that, but I find actually cutting while it's in place, as long as you're careful to not cut through anything but the plastic, is the best way to make sure that this mask goes in exactly the place that you want it to be. I finished cutting around here with my X-Acto knife. And again, before I put my X-Acto knife aside so that I don't poke myself, I'm going to take the blade out, I'm going to reverse it and insert it into the chuck area. Just tighten it so it doesn't fall out. And then I'm going to set it aside so that I won't stab myself. Now, you'll remember that there are some areas where when I set this down, it wanted to cling right away because this bowed up to meet it. Probably some static electricity stuff going on. And so there are wrinkles here. I'm not worried about that because I'm shooting with my air down on top of this. The mask is there to keep a nice edge. It isn't there to keep things from seeping under. If you were going to take a brush, you put this mask in place and we're going to take a brush and brush away or around here with watercolor or gouache or something else that's liquid, and you're actually going to have contact with this, that would be a problem, and you would need to go around and make sure that all of the little creased areas around here would be closed up, pressed down, so that you wouldn't get leaking. Okay? But I don't have to worry about that because I'm just going to blow on it here. Okay, so you want to take a moment when you catch your breath to look and see if you've got things even in the way that you want them to be even. If my breath were a little more even today, I think I might go in and make this a little darker, but I basically overall like this. There's going to be areas that go right up to the mask, and so that makes the mask justified. And you won't see that there's a clear demarcation between the mask and this background, because what you'll just see is the background going up to the black line. Okay? So we can set it aside, and one of the things that I want to tell you is that you need to I believe you need to immediately clean this out regardless of what kind of paint that you put in it. I tend to use, like I say, acrylic inks or paints, and so you don't want that drying on there. But even with the water-soluble stuff, you don't want this tube getting clogged. And so what I do is I run this under water so that it runs clear, and then I let it dry out in the air so that there's nothing on it that can just stay there and be clogged. If you've got more to do with it, don't worry about cleaning it, but if you're going to not use it for the rest of your session, I would get up and clean it right away. Now we're going to lift off the mask, and one of the things that happened is I found that this is going to pull up some of the ink because it's a little bit more high-tack than maybe we want to use, and so you might see some of the ink come up on my my mask. And I'm doing it very slowly because since it is high-tack, I don't want it to... oh, and you shouldn't do this until this is dry because I can actually smear this good effect, but for purposes of the camera and shooting, I wanted to get right to this. And, oh, it actually came off better than I thought. So you want to test things before you use them on certain papers, because on some papers it may actually catch on the tooth of the paper and lift stuff off. Now there are a couple places where the mask tore a little bit as I was lifting it off, and so you want to go in there with your X-Acto and peel it and then just pinch it and pull it off. Okay? And there's one more down here. This is masking tape. And I'll scan this. You may be able to see some, this has to come off, but you may be able to see some areas where there's a little bit of orange, like right here, that's over the black. If that bothers you, just cut your mask closer to the black edge. But I think that this is a nice way to add color. We didn't have to use orange, which was already here. We could have used a contrasting color. We could have used a yellow, or we could have used a dark black to make this all sort of gray and speckled and whatnot. There's a lot of different things you can do with this, and so I really urge you, if you enjoy playing with textures, to consider getting a mouth atomizer and learning what it can do for you.